we get started? We're going to get started, yeah. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the graveyard slot, just after lunch. Welcome to our online audience, who hopefully somewhere nice and cool. So I have to start off by apologizing for anyone that went to the Europa Cinemas conference, because you may have seen some of this presentation, but hopefully you haven't. And I have changed it a little bit as well. So for the purpose of the online audience, I'm Madeleine Probst. I'm the managing producer of Watershed in Bristol in the UK. And I wanted to share some of the work that we've done that I call slow work. So I think it's the work that often doesn't take priority in your organization, because we're always so busy delivering events. And yeah, so I'm trying to sort of focus on some of those slower pieces of work that we've been doing. So our main focus since COVID really has been about getting audiences back, the same as all of you. Just to give a bit of context of Bristol, this is the Colston statue, which during the Black Lives Matter protest was thrown into the water. Colston was a slave trader. Bristol is a harbour city which was involved in the slave trade. So it's just to give you a little bit of context, which I'll come back to later. Before COVID, we were thinking a lot about growth. You can see this weird tower at the back. We had plans for expansion. And it was all about growth, where you were thinking, well, how do we grow? We need more space, we need more cinemas, we need more events. And I think since 2019, with the Culture Declares emergency and the concerns around the environment, and also COVID, financial constraints and so on, we've been starting to think a bit differently. Like, what can we do within our footprint, our existing footprint? So we've been looking at different, thinking around that, and in particular, Rayworth's Donut Economics book was an inspiration to try to think about how we can grow, but more sustainably. And we were lucky to get a researcher called Zoe Rashbash, who's called Environmental Emergencies Action Researcher, to join our team. It's not a very catchy title, but Zoe is a total bundle of energy. She's an amazing character and comes from the kind of environmental movement. So she's an activist at heart, and she's brought a lot of energy to that work. So she started to help us build more of a framework around how we can progress sustainability beyond the straws, beyond the recycling, something a bit more significant. And also she looked a lot at the motivation. We were all a bit demotivated with the environmental work. We just felt like we don't have much capacity to do it. How do we start doing it? So she did a lot of education work with us. We did workshops with everybody from the kitchen porters all the way to the CEO, and started really kind of involving the whole team in it, which was really brilliant. One of the things she's created as part of it was a little guide, which you can find on our website, which we've shared with the wider sector, and talks a little bit about the approach that we took, things like changing the mindset of the organization first, setting up benchmarks, also going for low-hanging fruits, not always going for the most difficult things, but also prioritizing the things that are actually really damaging the environment, which, we used to put a lot of focus on recycling and things like that, which are great, but actually looking at our building, our heating, those bigger pieces of work were suddenly being much more prioritized. And also she's created an interesting conversation about how we can talk to other organizations that are also facing similar challenges. So she's working with cinemas and other types of venues and organizations. So these are some of the concepts that she's, so you can see here the big ticket items, so the things that are making a huge impact. The grounding work, which was very much about getting buy-in from everyone in the organization at all levels. This program is actually available if you want to use it on our website, and you can, I'm sure Zoe would be happy to sort of talk to you about it as well. But it's led to us having a much more visible presence for this work on our website as well, so take our audience on a bit of a journey with us. The other big topic I think for today is around inclusion. And we've been thinking a lot about this, and in Bristol specifically, we are a very diverse city. We think a lot about, does our organization represent the community that we're in? And I think it's something everyone should be asking themselves. If you're in a city and your team does not represent who's in your city, it's quite difficult to do audience development, to do effective audience development, because you're probably missing some of the pieces. And also when people come to your venue, they're probably not necessarily seeing themselves reflected on screen. If you're working with partners, if they're not seeing themselves represented within the management of the organization, that can also be a challenge. So we did quite a lot of work to kind of look at who is working for us at the moment, who's working in the organization. And that work might horrify some of you, because I know in different countries there's different ideas about, how you capture data and demographic data and what that means. Like I know in Germany you couldn't do this, for instance. But in the UK there's a very big drive to really understand the demographics that are coming to events, and then trying to take direct action to address this, but also hold cultural organizations accountable. If they're getting public funding, then they should be connecting with different types of groups and so on. Surprisingly, like all our team really bought into this. We've got almost 100% survey return from the staff, so they've really kind of bought into this piece of work. It's all anonymous. But it does start breaking down different teams, departments, and we're starting to understand who's working where, and how is class represented, for instance, in different parts of the organization. And it gives us quite a good baseline to work on, and who is on our board as well. The board, is even higher up than the management team. So who's making the decisions really for our organization? And also it has helped us understand things like the level of neurodivergent people within our organization, which is very high. So it also helps inform the kind of training that we can do within the team to sort of understand each other better. There's lots of actions that we've taken from these surveys, but I thought I'd share a few things that I think could be useful for more people. We really did a big piece of work looking at our recruitment processes and really interrogating why certain types of people were applying to us, other types weren't applying to work in the organization. So we looked at, what kind of information do we ask from them? How do we ask for it? Who interviews them? What's the type of interview panels? So there's things like we provide interview questions ahead of time. People can send in videos of why they want to work there rather than the written words. We've really cut back what we ask for. For people that are from underrepresented backgrounds in our team, they can have a pre-session with someone that's not involved in a recruitment to help them understand how they could transfer their skills to work in our organization. So it's a really sort of active, proactive way of changing the types of people that are working where we are. And there's an article that goes into a lot more detail written by Tony Bajnam, who's worked with us as an inclusion producer. We also did training, anti-racism training for the whole organisation over the COVID period, and that was a very deep piece of work and involving a local organisation that went quite deep into the law, history, language, and I think it allowed us as an organisation to come up with a shared framework around understanding racism, understanding structural racism a little bit better, and where Watershed sits within that, and where as individuals we sit within that as well. Other things that we did were like a bit more light-hearted. Like we created this video which kind of tells people what it's like to work at Watershed. And yeah, it was just trying to demystify for people that might not know what it's like working in an arts organization or might wonder what it's like. So we use that for every job now. There's like this little video that is permanently on our jobs page. We've also gone quite deep into the, we're quite a large organization compared to a lot of your venues, not just focus on cinema, but there's about 70 people that work at Watershed in different teams. So to actually make that function very well is quite complex. So we've looked at really developing resources for our own team as well. So it's not just for the public. Things like well-being resources, so people really understanding like if they're not well, like what do they do, what kind of support is available within the organization, supporting managers as well with like if you're going to have a good recruitment process, all your managers need to understand that as well. So putting together some really good resources around that. And it's a bit of a work in progress, but yeah, there's a lot of work being done to try to sort of make the organization more inclusive within, not just always focused on the outside. And another piece of work that I thought you could look at as an organization is because we have lots of different pockets. So we have, like Steph was saying earlier, we've got like the cafe bar, it's a trading company, they run lots of events. You've got your creative team, your technology, academic sort of team, you've got people that are front of house. There's a lot of different subcultures within Watershed and physicality as well. Some people are in one space, other people are in another space. And we felt like doing some work on like our shared values could be really good. And part of us were, and I am always a bit cynical about anything that vaguely resembles corporate processes, but it's actually been quite a good piece of work, and it's allowed us to have a whole set of conversations about it. So the way we came up with these values in the first place, we basically had the whole team, we closed the building down, which is very rare for one day. We got the whole team to come, paid people that are part-time or to come and do a bunch of training which they needed to do, health and safety and things like that. And then part of the day we worked on these values. So we started thinking about words that we thought resonated with our work, ways of working that resonated with what we aspire to be. And these were refined more and more. So like the inclusive one, before it was much more like, we are here for everyone. It was something like that. But in the last couple of years, after having done the anti-racism training and people becoming more open about challenges that they've faced at work or in different situations, we decided to go further, recognizing that there is harm that's done quite often. And we just took it to the next level, where to actually acknowledge that, you know, racism is in our society and probably in our organisation as well to some extent, and we will address it when it happens. And the values, I think, help as well with recruitment when we're onboarding people to kind of, because we were making a lot of assumption as a smaller company that people understood when they joined what kind of organisation we are. And whilst we don't want everyone to be the same, you know, difference is a big part of what makes Watershed work. At the same time, that shared sense of value is quite important to, that people understand what page you're on as a group. So, yeah, I'll just finish off like with all this work. It's very slow, but I think in a way it underpins like all the exciting work that we do. Some of the things that Steph presented earlier, you know, we're able to then be a space where people do genuinely feel like they can do a takeover. When there's tensions, we have a framework that we can go back to. When there's things that happen, like we're able to sort of talk about it. And it also allows us to kind of take some risks, like the horizontal cinema screening, for instance, the deaf conversations about cinema. These are quite expensive projects, but because we've kind of set ourselves this framework, it allows us to kind of commit to it as an organisation. So it's complex work, but I feel really proud of what's been achieved, you know, with those slower pieces of work. I can see it with the recruitment. My team is super diverse now, and I've used those recruitment practices. It didn't used to be a very diverse team. We've got people moving into management roles that are from different backgrounds. So something is happening, and it is changing things from the inside out. So rather than us always trying to sort of reach out to different communities, they're within the organisation. So it's very slow work, it's very complex work, but I recommend it. And just spending the time on your teams, you know, a lot of the stuff that we've been hearing in the last few days is all about the activities, serving the community, marketing, audience development, eventising. You do need to look after the teams as well and invest in that, which is quite difficult because we all know we're at capacity and so on. And I think going back to what I was saying at the beginning, sometimes doing a little bit less of the outside stuff and more of the work inside the organisation can have some good results. I think I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you. This is an overwhelming presentation, as you probably know, for a lot of us. Is yours working? No, it has a button. So I prepared a few questions, but I think everyone here is just aching to put you to the question, since you've been questioning everyone. So is there anyone who wants to ask questions or make a remark to Maddie? Or is lunch still? There we go. You were first.
So first of all, sorry. First of all, I have a word for you, and the word is respect. Truly, that's what comes to mind after seeing all of this. So congrats. And the question is, with all of these and so many challenges in between, if you have to elect one challenge that actually shaked you up, what would it be?
One challenge. I think COVID was it forced some of this work. The combination of COVID and the Black Lives Matter moments in Bristol. So all this was there before, but it brought it it made us think about like without sounding like a politician, but rebuilding better as we had that opportunity. We had a bit of time to do training, to reflect, to be more reflective actually, and realizing that we'd been running. We were just growing, running, doing everything. And I think to slow down was a really good thing for the organization. It's complex because you open up Pandora's box a little bit. And we're still unpacking a lot of that. But I think also with the new generation coming through, we really have to look at things like well-being. There's different expectations from the younger generation about the kind of environment they're willing to work in. Like, I spent years working for free, working long hours. They're just not willing to do it. It's a different, they want to work for themselves. They can see it's mad, like what we've been doing. So it's how do you, you've got the right mindset, be a freelancer, build your own emporium. But I think we have to, as organizations, we have to think about being attractive. And before we try to solve all the problems in our community, we need to also make sure our environments are healthy.
I think the slowing down is almost like a Buddhist wisdom that you put in there.
We don't really achieve it, but we try a little bit to. I think it's more like committing to an idea, and even though you get busy in between, you stick with that path, and you find strategies to make it work. So we have an environmental group of people that come from, and it's not always coming from management. I think it's really getting people that are excited about the environment to come together at different levels and then solve the problem and keep it on the agenda almost. And it's the same with the board. If you have a board that don't care about anything, they're just there because they've been there forever, they're not going to be useful in terms of moving you on. Whereas if you have a board that we really changed our board, we did a fresh recruitment, and suddenly we have, someone that's an activist, black literary agent, and she's pushing us for change. So I think it's about commitment more than necessarily slowing down.
Okay.
You kind of answered my question already. I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the process of getting this work done. How did you spread the tasks?
Just look at Steph and my face.
I mean, because it strikes me as a lot of these, a lot of the work is sort of the domain of HR.
It is. So
how involved were you in HR activities, being a producer?
Yeah. So we used to just have one HR part-time person, and we've invested more in this now. So we now have like what's called a head of people, and I think some of the cross-organizational groups was how we started. So we'd have an inclusion group, and then we have an environmental group, and basically they came to the conclusion that we needed better HR and better recruitment processes, better everything, more support for staff, more well-being resources. So we've invested in HR, but and there's people like Helen Jaffo, who's in that role at the moment, that's done a lot of thinking about the resources and the training. And I think it's easy to do the training at the beginning because everyone's like, oh yeah, anti-racism training, let's all do it. But then it's how you keep onboarding new people as they come in. And that's what I think she's doing a good job with that.
That was exactly the question I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Like, you create a new culture, and then new people start coming in, people start leaving. So how do you make sure that you hold on to those newfound aspects of your culture?
Yeah, I think it's the onboarding thing. This is the challenge we're on at the moment. So things like the values help with onboarding. Everyone that starts at Watershed gets a session with our CEO, where she talks a lot about the business, the values, how it works, but also they've met that person and right at the beginning of starting with us. And we have a lot of, meetups that are about a bit like these workshops actually, where we have like a creative team where there's people from different groups, different projects that come together. So I think thinking about the elements that you've enjoyed this week here, and thinking, well, can I bring some of that into my organization? That's how I started thinking about, like, we can't have meetings that are always transactional about, have you done this? Oh, the program needs to be here. Like, we need to have meetings that are sometimes more about creative development, meetings that need to address difficult topics like ethics. And we have long discussions about, like, our role in technology, for instance, and because we're moving more into the technology world and taking a position on things. And that engages your team because they start thinking, well, you do actually have values. You do care. It's not just bullshit.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to share or question? Right. Well, I think I
You
had
can
one
interrogate staff over drinks.
Yeah, you can.
They'll tell you the truth.
Um, I'm going to ask a question, and it's based on something you said to me in complete confidence and private. But no, that's fine. No. But of course, there's an internal drive to make these kinds of changes.
Yeah.
But how did external factors like rope into this? Like, in what way were you pushed from the outside to change, and like how does that stack up to maybe other countries? I mean, how specific is that for Watershed?
I mean, I don't know what it's like everywhere, but certainly in Bristol, there was always tensions around like race and provisions for different communities in Bristol. The level of cultural provision for who, depending on where you come from, the level of opportunities you get. So there was that tension in the city for a long, long time. And Watershed's always been, I would say, very, proactive in terms of outreach. We set up one of the first black film festivals in the UK, working with community partners. We have long-standing relationships. So we have a good reputation, but we felt the conversation changing over that COVID period, and some of the stuff that we were doing, which in the end is always was about often bringing people to our venue. Or, we would get funding and then we will give you funding. And some of the conversations in the UK is about, no, actually, the money should go to black-led organizations, it should be decentralized. So suddenly with the big cat, with a big, we're the problem, we're the institution. So it's quite a weird space to be in. So we're thinking a lot more about when we go for funding, when we don't, when we just open the door for people and let them run something. I mean, I'll give you an example that I was approached by our city council to do a big celebration of hip-hop, 50 years of hip-hop in Bristol. And I used to be in that world, so I could have easily put it together in our cinema and so on, and led the project. But as a team, we made a conscious decision not to do that, and instead push the council to fund a black-led organization to lead the project. The council were not keen, but we were kind of saying, leave the space, let this new organization get the money, because otherwise it'd be all the money's gone to Watershed, and then we're distributing it. So I think it's thinking about your position in an ecosystem, and that's some of the work we've done around structural racism. It is thinking about things you haven't thought about before, and thinking about it from a different perspective.
Well, you seem to have developed over the years a very fine-grained awareness of where you stand, what's going on, like locally in your society, how the issues you might need to address. You've become very open. I think that's commendable, and I'm pretty sure that we're not as far along, and probably most people here aren't. But
there is a tension, though, and I'll share it. Is finances.
Yeah.
All this work is beautiful, and I wish we can carry on doing it in the way that we've been doing it. The other pressure is we have a huge financial gap. At the moment, we're holding on to all our principal, we're keeping the staff, we're not. How long can we go on like this is the question for me, and whether this work is possible. So we're kind of testing how far we can go with it, and pushing very hard with foundations. And some are buying into the whole thing. They're realizing that we're doing something different, something special, and they're investing. But there's still a big hole because everything costs so much money. Like the deaf conversations about cinema that I showed you, that's around £500 per event for the BSL interpreters. For how many people were in the conversation? 20. Sometimes it goes to 50, doesn't it? But that's a very expensive thing
That's
to
a lot
run.
of risk, at least, that you have to take financially.
Yeah, it's just whether you can find the public funding or private donations or whatever to work in that way. I think that's the challenge, the big challenge for this work.
Well, I mean, in the end, if you become more inclusive, like a crowdfunding, which of course is my subject, would be more successful because there are more people attached to you. But that is probably a theory to be
Time is not our friend.
tested. No, time is nobody's friend. Certainly not mine. Let's check the time, by the way, because this was, of course. I mean, I was gonna say, like, are there any like mistakes or course corrections that you had to make? Do you want to share? But maybe we're kind of out of time. We have to move on to Linda.
Yeah,
I don't know about you.
move on to Linda. There's hundreds of things
Because
we do
we can keep on
differently.
talking for 2 days, I
Yeah.
think.
We can talk about it over a drink.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. This is great. So now Linda is up. Sitting is mandatory. Yeah, it's for the stream. I'm sorry. Yeah, it gets pretty low actually. Apparently you have to sit.
Right. So I know a lot of you are feeling comatose after lunch, as do I. So bear with me. My name is Linda, and I am the representative from Gothenburg Hagabion Cinema. And I was asked to present a bit about how we organize things at Hagabion. And the focus of my presentation is how Hagabion is basically mostly run by 120 volunteers. There is, of course, one person working full-time who is paid, and there's a handful of people working part-time on various chores. And Hagabion is a non-profit, non-political organization, and I think I mentioned it in my presentation, but next year we're turning 50, and I thought that we were pretty old, but in comparison now to others, I realize we're not that impressive. So Hagabion is open 50 weeks per year, thanks to its volunteer workers. We're actually even working, right now it's closed, starting up on Saturday again. And my team of volunteers, we have a shift starting on Tuesday evening. So we work every other week, and we're 4 to 5 persons normally. And here we see a schedule of the projectionists and the team working as cashiers, ushers, and presenting the films. In addition, there are volunteers forming the board. The board is solely made up by volunteers. We have a program group which is led by a person who works part-time, but otherwise it's just volunteers there as well. We have a social media group which I am part of, along with 2 more people. We have a web group, we have a film and coffee group, and we have an open movie theater group. Hang on. And I'd say that Hagabion is very open to any initiative that we volunteers present to them, and they kindly offer to support us economically, with technological support, with marketing. So we have a lot of regular events initiated by the volunteers. We have 3 different cine clubs. We have the Ciné Club Français, we have Ciné Espagnol, and we have a thing called the German Autumn. So the Ciné Français is the longest running club. It was founded 20 years ago by one of my former colleagues at a school, and it takes place every Wednesday evening, and normally, well, that is during spring and autumn, not during summer. And the Cine Español takes place every other Sunday, apart from summer as well, which is a bit of a slow period, like for most of you as well, I think. And then we have the German Autumn. They focused on just doing an autumn program. And of course, these cine clubs, they collaborate with embassies, organizations, and European contacts to get distribution and try to get the films that they want. Sometimes they are thematic, like in this coming autumn. The Cine Español will basically treat the fact that there's 50 years ago since both the coup d'etats of Uruguay and Chile, and also 40 years ago since Argentina became a democracy. And here in the pictures you see, well, we have almost a full movie theater and people moderating with guests invited to talk after the film. And here to the right we see one of our volunteers together with the consul of Chile, who is placed in Gothenburg. And like I said, Hagabion is very positive to initiatives. Here's another initiative of volunteers. We call it in Swedish film and fika, which is coffee or tea with cake. And originally it started with members working the matinees of Tuesdays and Thursdays. Usually people of a certain age, maybe retired. I should say that I'm one of the youngest volunteers, and I'm 51, so you understand that we need to balance it up a bit. We have some work to do, I think, there. But so these people started asking friends to come and watch a film with them, because if there's enough people during a shift, we're encouraged to watch the film. They want us to keep up to date on what we're showing so that we can recommend and discuss it with our customers. So they would bring friends, and the friends would bring their own coffee or tea, and they would bring a cake. But then they got tired of baking, I think, maybe. So they asked, could we make this an official event instead, and could maybe Hagabion sponsor with money? So Hagabion is sponsoring with money, and it's a regular event on Tuesdays and Thursdays when we have the matinees. The matinees stop during summer as well, I should say. Yeah. And, well, like I said, there are regular events. I already mentioned a few, but then there are also occasional events that any volunteer can propose, really. And here's an example. We had a thematic opening week with special guests invited every evening for the documentary. I'm translating from Swedish. We stayed at Hvitfeldtska, which is about the riots during the EU summit in 2001 in Gothenburg, when also the then President George W. Bush visited. I don't know if you remember or if you're too young, but yeah, quite a tumultuous time in Gothenburg. So at this picture we see the director to the right, Nils Petter Sjögren, and in the middle we have an activist and left-wing politician, America Vera Zavala, who's also one of the founders of the organization Attack in Sweden. And before the actual premiere of this film mentioned, we also put up a photo exhibition outside of one of our movie theaters. So you see Nils, who's not only a director but also a photographer, who actually first published a photo book on the events. So he brought some of his photos from this photo book and the events. He took like hundreds of photos during this, and then he hid them in a casserole for the police not to take away. And I think that saved them. So anyway, we tried to promote the film a bit with the photo exhibition, and I think that was a couple of weeks before. And of course, during the time that we presented the film, he was still there. Very nice. And finally, a member of staff also suggested, I know somebody mentioned something similar here before, the open movie theatre. So we've had like that for, I think, 2 years now. It's an inclusive place, free of charge for everyone attending. And it's a space for director with limited resources to show their work, mostly young directors. We have a set time and place open to request, Mondays at 6 p.m. And here you see, to the right, we see a photo of our very last event, most recent one, where a non-finished film project was presented. And also the organizers invited people to play some music before the film. And also as a gift, they got our tote bag, the classical Hagabion tote bag, which I now, after seeing, a funnier tote bag presented yesterday, I think it was, I feel that ours is a bit dated, but I'm not sure I'm going to convince them to change it. We'll see. I think that was about all I had to say. Yeah, or ask away if there's anything that you feel I left out. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Does anyone have questions or things to share? There, can someone? Yeah, there you go. You get a microphone.
Hi. Not yet.
Yeah.
Now it is. Thank you, first of all. Can you elaborate a bit on the volunteering program? What's the drive of the volunteers? How is it to manage so many?
Well, I'm just a simple volunteer, so I don't manage anything, but it's been like that since the beginning of time, I think. Most people, like I said, are a bit older than me, so maybe they start as volunteers when they leave their jobs. I think what motivates people is they really love the place, Hagabion, and of course we get to watch film for free. There's a restaurant inside our cinema, and we get a certain percentage of the food there. And they organize like small events, like a summer party, a Christmas party, or we get to preview a film and have breakfast on a Saturday together. So I think it's the community feeling that motivates people, and I think a few people are loners, and this gives them a bit of a context, to socialize. I forgot to say something, actually, I remember now. Can I say it now?
You can say it.
We're actually open on Christmas Eve as well, on the theme of loneliness. So all through the day, we present various films, both for kids, for grown-ups, etc., for people who don't celebrate Christmas or might not have anybody to celebrate Christmas with. And then we serve mulled wine and gingerbread, of course, non-alcoholic mulled wine.
Well, that's a lovely theme. Thank you. So maybe one, unless there's a question.
Sorry. So you mentioned that the volunteers are a bit older. Is that also the audience? Are they also the same age, or?
I would say that our audience is more mixed than the volunteer group, but still, I'd say it's mostly female and slightly older than me, in general.
Has anyone got any suggestions? I mean, one of the things I would say as an observation, because I work with a lot of smaller cinemas, volunteer-run cinemas across my region. And one of the things we're talking to them about is, it's reflecting on what the expectations are for volunteer. So do you have to have loads of spare time? Do you have to be quite well off? Do you have, so it's starting to look at maybe some of the barriers for other groups to come and volunteer in your organization. And it might be that you have some sponsored places, for instance, where, there's a volunteer system, but you acknowledge that for some communities it might be harder to volunteer than for others. Because then you start recognizing this kind of structural imbalance that there is. And the other thing is perhaps looking at pop-ups within your structure. So where there's like a less of a commitment, but maybe once a month you could have a different group. So you have all the know-how about projecting, the space, all of that knowledge. But perhaps it's about every now and again, like opening up the space to a different community that isn't so represented in your core group. I don't know I'm wondering if there's anyone else that, because they are volunteer, like Steph, you volunteer for the Cube, don't you? And that's a really young demographic. Do you have anything to say? I don't know where the mic is.
Cheers. Yeah, I also volunteer at a place called the Cube in Bristol that Maddie was just mentioning, which is a single screen, multiplex supposedly, but they do a lot of music events earlier. I was telling some people up here about it earlier on. And yeah, their volunteer base is predominantly people in their 20s. There's some older people who kind of take on the more onerous volunteering tasks, some might say, like the finance managing and the kind of key holding, as it were, so the people who manage the events on the night and have to sit outside. But their core volunteering base is people who maybe only do it once a month, but are, definitely under 40, the majority of them. And a lot of them are then involved in programming. So it's got quite a flat structure. It's kind of, it's come from like an anarchist principle base, so it's an entirely flat organization, so anyone can program it is the idea, and anyone can put an event on, anyone can work any role, and it's meant to just be this super open art space, which it is. I mean, you run into issues with that, don't get me wrong. I made it sound really fun and nice, but it does mean that it's a very chaotic space in which to volunteer and work, but it's just an interesting study of a way that you can exhibit.
I think it's all of us thinking about structures, isn't it? If we're trying to change the balance, it's then thinking, well, what kind of environment is there when people arrive or want to engage with it or want to work in that space? But it's complex, because you sounds like you do an amazing job, and you have a really nice group that have strong motivations for being involved, and maybe that's fine as well.
We do, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking like students who don't have a lot of money and maybe can't afford go to the cinema as much. I just think that maybe they don't know about us and the way it works, because just working as a volunteer and being able to go to all of our films for free, I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? So I'm thinking we need to, we need to holler to the universities and get some more young people in. Yeah.
I do recognize a lot in your story, because we are working with, I think, around 80 volunteers, and most of them are rather old. And we're also in the process of getting younger people. But it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Once you have very old people in your house, they sometimes we have younger people, most of them in this social program from reintegration organizations. And that is kind of nice, but when we have actual young people just volunteering because they think it's nice to volunteer in the cinema, most of the times they leave after a very short amount of time, because it's simply rather peculiar to work with so much old people. And we have a lot of people in our restaurant, very young people, very diverse group, but they just want to earn money. And there's so much work in the Netherlands right now, so it's easier to work for money than to do a voluntary job. But it's very difficult because we want to make a change in that, but we just don't know how.
I feel you.
I think we're going back to like when we had the group from Bologna, you know, your young people coming in. It was really interesting. The thing they kept on focusing on was their career. Like, it's making us closer to the film industry. So I think it's just recognizing that maybe at that age you are really thinking about your career or building up your experience, earning money and drinking, having fun. But it's trying to really give it a sense of purpose. So maybe like, you know, this, if it was with a formal course that does events management, for instance, or something like that, then this can be a credit in an actual event that they put on, or something like that, where there's a really tangible outcome for them.
Yeah.
Or like Steph says, go anarchist, and just anything goes. But that means probably like the rota won't be so neat.
No.
It might upset some of the people.
Right. Thank you.
Is this the microphone that I...
This one, your PowerPoint is on here. You can just use the arrow.
Okay.
Right into it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Don't worry too much. It's a chat.
Okay.
Everybody here is lovely. Yeah.
I tried.
Just have a conversation. We're just having a conversation.
So there was no T letter in the alphabet while the opening session, so we missed my intro. So we all missed my introduction. So hello everyone. I'm Hajna from Budapest, from Hungary, and working for Budapest Film, which is the largest art house cinema network in Hungary. It operates 6 cinemas in the city of Budapest. I am responsible for the young audiences, but the leaders of this lab wanted me to talk about some managing problems and staff difficulties. So sorry for not being as inspirational as you were here. And
I'll stop you there. Sharing, you know, things that go wrong is really, really important in this lab, and this is where we kind of learn a lot. So I think it's really great that you're sharing some of the things that haven't gone so right. And I think a lot of us have shared problems as well. So yeah, we're really pleased that you're telling us about some of your problems. I'm sure we all have a lot of problems.
okay. So I think it's important to know that operating art house cinemas in Hungary today, or work in any other cultural field, it often means finding ways to survive. So I won't be very positive now, but but there is one great thing that I will be very short, because I've prepared 3 questions. Let me show you. The first one is, how to deal with the situation that during the past decade, a large chunk of your regular audiences and potential employees has moved abroad. The second one is what to do if the cashiers of fast food restaurants earn higher wages than your projectionists or cinema operators. And the last one is how to find hosts who would recognize Academy Award-winning directors at premiere galas and would let them in without checking their names on the list. And if I have some more minutes, I can also add some comments to these questions. I don't want to say that the migration of people out from Hungary is the main reason of our problems, but I think that when we talk about our audiences and when we are talking about how to reach our audiences, we just cannot ignore the fact that the significant part of our former core audiences are missing, and probably they are working in and attending your cinemas in the UK and Netherlands, Germany and Austria. For the second one, when it comes to non-competitive salaries, it means that most of our employees are somehow addicted to cinema, are cinema fans, cinephiles, and working in our cinemas no matter what their salary is. But in the same time, it means that almost every of them have a second job or even a third one and just can't focus fully on their tasks in the cinemas. The staff is also very small and everyone has multiple responsibilities, and due to multiple tasks it's always difficult to find the time to reflect on our work and to analyze our activities. For example, we have newsletters, but then there's no capacity to track and analyze the effect of it. And about the third question, we have already talked several times about the involvement of youngsters in the daily life of our cinemas, and with this third question I just wanted to indicate that giant generation gap that we sometimes encounter. Expand. Maybe not or not now, maybe later, or maybe in the smaller groups. There is just one thing that I want to tell you. We do all those things that you mentioned here in the previous days: event, cinema programming, social media marketing. We also have creative trailers as well. We are trying to catch our audiences, but there is one thing that, but it's more nowadays. It's more about not about innovation, but more about survive, finding ways to survive. And there is one thing that we did in October, is that we closed 3 of our cinemas, the largest ones, for Mondays and Tuesdays. It's because of saving energy, and also to concentrate the audience, because there are 3 more cinemas where they can attend on Mondays and Tuesdays, and there are the other days of the week when they can attend those largest cinemas as well. And we plan, the plan was to have this closure for the winter season, but it remained for the summer period as well, because it really saves a visible amount of money. That's how we operate now.
I'm sorry, I've never been to Budapest, so I don't know. But are there like film schools? Is there like students where maybe you can advertise, and as maybe it's also something to compare with what Linda said. Like, and I just heard something over lunch, like that some volunteers of this festival come from Hong Kong and other countries, and they're volunteers, but because they see exceptional work and they meet people. And is there a way where you can get resources maybe outside of Hungary? I don't know.
Of course,
Yeah.
but when it comes to volunteers, it is always it's also it requires also working hours and energy to deal with the volunteers, to have a system of volunteering system. So certainly yes. And we try, and we have a lot of cooperations with other companies. But
Okay. All right.
I'm interested in asking everyone really about like the shortage of staff. Are you having similar problems with recruitment? We are with finance people. We can't find finance people anymore. They don't want to work for a messy organization like Watershed. We're also struggling with technical staff. A lot of them have gone into freelance work, and they're earning a lot more money than they're earning with us. So we're having to buy them back as freelancers. But yeah, I don't know. Have you got similar experience? Yeah.
I'm going to answer to 2 questions at the same time, how to find and yours. First, I am not surprised it's difficult today to find hostess that doesn't recognize an Oscar-winning directors, because yes, people, generation evolve, and now what was the basis sometime of what we knew about cinema is not the same. So I think it's a bit of a training, but it's not a problem by itself. I mean, new generation has new references, and it's going with it. I have the same kind of situation. I don't want to of not recognizing someone in my cinema. I was like, you didn't recognize him, and I was just like, yeah, okay, of course. I'm 50 and she's 20, so it's normal. For that, yes, the biggest issue is technical for me right now, especially 35 millimeters. Finding a projectionist to have a training as a projectionist, not as someone who can use a digital cinema. Projectors, that's not a problem. You can train people to do it. Finding people with the competencies that can go through all the other technical sectors of projections, it's becoming harder and harder and more expensive.
So I know the Europa Cinemas team is looking at developing some training around like projectionists, and probably more around digital, but looking at some like training to try to get more people into it and upskill them more as well. Did anyone else have any suggestions to offer? Because someone's opened up, and around like the wages, I think it is a problem. Our sector does not pay very well. How do you make your organization attractive to work in, even if you're not able to offer very high salaries, and not rely on cinema addicts? Anyone has got some suggestions? Yeah, we've got one at the back, or two. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it could be two ways how to find some solution. The first is to use Zoom or something like it, and it's only online discussion. And the second is to not invite actors, directors only for the discuss, but for example the people who are connected to the topic. We have documentary about killing the journalist, and we invited the long working journalist, discuss about dangers, and so on, or make discuss with somebody from high school, university. Maybe it could be cheaper, and
you don't have to recognize them, do you? Because they're not famous. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. And we've got one at the back there. Thanks. But yeah, opening up, so you're not just going for that cinephile audience, but I'm sure you already do things like that.
Of course,
yeah.
and I have in my young audience program, I have almost 300 screenings in a year for 20,000 students. So we are.
Maybe you're doing a little bit too much.
Maybe
it's making you very tired.
Maybe, and those six venues is.
Maybe it is about. Maybe it is about taking a step back from the volume of work, from a team of volunteers. From a small team, and just going, we can't do everything. And it's understanding, like, why are we doing it? Is it, is there a really good reason for, going back to some of the stuff that we were seeing with Marvin on the first day, using one of his charts of going, how vital is it? And placing it in a chart. And it might be that actually, we had to cut our education department. I was really, really upset about it. We used to do loads of stuff with kids, exactly like here. But at some point, we had to recognize we just don't have the capacity, the team. We can't do it for free. And we've refocused our family offer. Just during the summer holidays, it's more of a commercial offering with coloring books in the cafe. It's not what it used to be, but we can deliver it without killing ourselves. And we've got one at the back.
Yes, it's probably not so much advice, but like sharing experience. When I started to work in my organization like 10 years ago, we got a very small team, because I'm not sure if it's not, probably I will rather stand up. And it was like always this advice: get volunteers. You're working in cinema's fun, free time activity. I was like, nah, it's actually not good idea. Two reasons. One, actually, almost each volunteer need another person who is paid, basically just herding them. It's actually, volunteers are very time costly, unless you got another volunteers doing it, but actually then you're basically already like building like communism. Another thing is, wonderfully, it doesn't work. Another thing is, yes, it's like, you're not expecting, like, I opened Steel Mill, like, just, I don't have people there, just get volunteers, like, you can be volunteer in like Steel Mill, like, you'll be warm, you can be creative. No, you are expecting to get paid. But when you are working in culture, it's fun, you don't need to be paid, it's actually probably not a real work. And like, as your organization is also like being put in this position Why would you pay so many people? Why don't use volunteers? No, those people should be paid, and those young students which are getting from like universities, especially art ones, being put from the start into a position you start doing something not to get paid. It's bad habit. Also, like in a society, so we by lobbying kinda make sure, yes, we are cinema, but we are also like a company, we are business, we are founded, so but we want those funds for those kids. They will be paid. I don't have a single volunteer in my cinema. I would never force anybody to work a volunteer. People should be paid, and they can also see all movies for free. So I'm paying them better actually, even than my competitor.
I mean, I think there's different models because some people, like I used to volunteer for Oxfam at all the music festivals in the UK, Glastonbury and so on. And I had to stop because of this. It clashes. But it brought me a lot of joy, you know, and a lot of positive things. And I met some really interesting people. I had a really good experience at those festivals. I think you can also create a positive experience, but it's demanding. It demands a framework. And all of these questions about the return on investment is what I think you need to do, because it sounds like you're doing a huge amount of work on a very small team, and maybe that's the return strategy, is to think what can go, what do we have to keep the DNA of the festival and the essential elements of it, and what can go. Is there any other sharing that anyone wants? Yeah.
I would like to ask first, how many screens do you have in your cinema?
21 altogether.
21 screens?
Yeah, in 6 venues.
In 6 venues?
6 different venues.
Nowadays we are working with only one person, which is cinema operator, but also at the same time projectionist. Sometimes the cash officer is also starting the projections, because everything is online if you have DCPs. So in case of working with 2 different professionals, one operator, one projectionist, working with 2 duties can double his price. In that case, the food restaurant's cashiers comes to you, because you get paid, they get paid better in on your cinemas.
That's a very concrete proposition.
But for example, on my screenings to the young audiences in the mornings in our cinemas, the projectionist is the person who does the ticketing, the billing, if it's needed. He lets in the students to the cinema hall, and he is the person who cleans the room after them.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it sounds like you have to review the level of activity you can do, unless you can find a volunteering model which works for you, works for the people that are engaged. Because it's. Have you solidified your mind on what the workshop should be? Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
This was awesome. Thank you. So I noticed we were slowly drifting into concrete solutions. I love concrete solutions. And I really enjoyed the last workshop where we picked from the group a cinema and we just workshopped a little bit on a specific problem. So unless you guys disagree, I want to propose that we do the same thing for the final workshop of this lab. We go into groups, pick one of the cinemas in your group and try to devise one or more strategies on how to diversify your team. Because I think that's an issue for a lot of people, whether it's age or background or whatever. And then we'll do a last round of very short presentations on that. See if there's any like cool creative things that you guys can come up with, because I'm sure that this is a way to inspire everyone. I think we can go with the same groups. That would probably be easiest. You have about half an hour. Yeah, half an hour, 35 minutes. 5 minutes before the end, we'll put a message in the group.